My 3 years, we won 85 games and we lost 8.
There was a time when Hamline was ranked with Kentucky and Vanderbilt and NYU and Valparaiso at that time. Those 4 were ranked in the top 4 teams in the nation. Now, all of those schools, other than Hamline, are Division I schools.
You know, Hamline University has a tremendous basketball history with Joe Hutton having been here for so many years. And it's a history that really in many ways defines basketball in the nation. And that Hamline University's basketball program was one of the leading programs in the nation.
You know, it's neat. The history of Hamline, particularly in basketball, is pretty profound, and certainly that area was the marquee to, you know, to our institution.
We were ranked nationally most of the time. And as I said, the NAIB tournament in those days was one of the premier tournaments.
Well, the NAIA tournament was a big deal. It was held in Kansas City. It was 32 teams. It was there for a week. You had to win 5 or 6 games. You played pretty much every day until you get one day off. But the first 3 or 4 days you had to play in a row. They would play 8 games a day.
There was a lot of enthusiasm. And when we went to Kansas City, we had some good following down there. Everybody waited to go to Kansas City for the national tournament.
Wherever we went, it was standing room crowds in all these stadiums. And Hamline was kind of the big basketball team in town.
Hamline became very popular in New York when we played in the Madison Square Garden.
Well, we played in New York, Chicago, Boston Garden. I scored 20 points in Madison Square Garden. Had my picture in the New York papers and so on. That's a big memory.
Not sure there's another Division III school in the entire country that can lay claim to having some alums that went on and played in the NBA. Some of those guys were Don Eliason, who played for the Boston Celtics, Jim Fritchie, who played for the Minneapolis Lakers, Joe Hutton Jr., Coach Hutton's son, also played for the Minneapolis Lakers. Of course, Vern Mickelson, was an NBA Hall of Famer, went on and played for the Minneapolis Lakers as well. Johnny Norlander, Howie Schultz, Raleigh Seltz, all those guys went on and played in the NBA, and obviously were key pieces of the success in some of those national title teams here at Hamline as well.
One of my best friends played for McAllister College, and he used to say, you know, it always griped me. We would play at McAllister, and the coach would say we're going on a trip. And they would get on a bus and go to Luther College or someplace in Iowa. And that was their trip. And you guys at Hamline, you'd fly to Los Angeles, you'd fly to New Orleans, and play in a tournament with South Carolina, Western Kentucky, schools like that, and we were playing Cole College and so on. And they always thought that that was unfair. So our non-conference were not necessarily playing local schools. Ours were always playing national schools.
It's pretty amazing the schools that Hamline used to play back in the Hutton era. Some names that are as synonymous with some of the powers of college basketball today. Schools like Stanford and DePaul and Gonzaga and South Carolina, Vanderbilt, teams from really all across the country.
That trip was, as I think I mentioned, 28 days. We left here on the 10th of December. We were due to fly down to Des Moines, but we had weather. So we didn't fly to Des Moines. We took the train. We were going to play Simpson, which is a small school just south of Des Moines in Indianola, Iowa. We got there late. The stands were packed, as much as they could be packed at a small school like that. Then we flew to Denver, where we played Regis College, and Regis was the team that was beaten in the finals in Kansas City the previous year. Then headed out to Los Angeles for the Pepperdine tournament out there. So we played 3 games because we were in the finals against Pepperdine, and they beat us, as they had beaten Brigham Young the day before. Then we went to San Francisco. From there we got on the ship, the Lurleen, and spent 5 nights and 4 days on that ship, going over to Hawaii.
And during that time, Coach Hutton could not see us not practicing. So we went up on the deck one day and we started practicing, and the boat rolled a little bit and the ball went over the deck into the water, and he called off. There were no more practices because he was not going to lose any more basketballs in the ocean.
We played 4 games, 2 against the University of Hawaii, and the armed services had teams, like the submariners had a team, and the Navy had a team, and Hickam Air Force had a team, and the Marines had a team, and so on. We played 2 of those, and I've forgotten which teams they were, but of course we won all 4 of those games, didn't have any problems. Flew back to Seattle area, played Gonzaga with just the 1 game, then flew back to cities, the whole thing taking 28 days. Never came close to getting any kind of trip like that again. Got some trips, but not like that.
Well, I think there was a lot of interest on campus among the professors. I know a lot of our professors came to the games. It was very popular entertainment. They were happy to be professors at Hamline because of the recognition that the school was getting, and it was good for everybody.
There was a lot of pride. I look back at it, and we felt that when we went places that people had heard of Hamline. There was a great deal of pride. That name lingered with a lot of people. I didn't realize that.
Also in those days, when the students wanted to come to the games, they had to get in line at 5 o'clock if they wanted to get a seat at all.
I go to the games now, we had more people at practices than they do.
One of our big rivalries was with St. Thomas, and when we would beat St. Thomas, it was not unusual for the students to go up in the tower of the Old Main and ring the bells to celebrate that victory.
St. John's had a narrow gym. The sideline was right with the people sitting. So you had to ask to be, the referee would say, move in a little bit, 3 feet, and you can throw the ball in. Scores tied, end of the game, I got the ball out of bounds, the referee hands me the ball, guy from the stands pulls my pants down. So I'm standing there, my basketball shorts are on my knees, I'm holding the ball, I look at the referee, he's going, he's counting, I don't care if your pants are down, you better get that ball in 5 seconds. So I quick threw it in, pulled up my pants, and the game went on.
Joe was soft-spoken. He did not yell. I don't ever remember him yelling. When he talked, you listened. He was in charge. As compared to the coaches these days, he sat on the bench. He said, I do my coaching during the week, except for timeouts. He'd talk to us. But he was a very, I would say, a humble, soft-spoken guy.
Well, you know, nowadays you see the coaches stand up and walk around up and on the floor. Joe never did that.
Joe's offense gave you good shots. You didn't have to take any flyers like you watch these kids taking these days.
You played a man-to-man defense. We never played a zone. It was always man-to-man, and you were responsible for that player.
So I asked Joe, I said, would you care if I shot free throws one-handed? He says, hell, he says, I don't care if you kick them just so they go in. So that was Joe. Or part of Joe, I should say.
Hamline did attract the best high school players. And one of the reasons is that my dad produced so many coaches that at one stretch in the state basketball tournament, of the 8 teams in the finals, 6 had basketball coaches from Hamline. So naturally, they would recommend kids to Hamline.
You wouldn't make a connection between the coach Joe Hutton and Tom Hutton. Tom was like one of us. I don't think we ever saw him in any different light, like coach's son, like he's going to get a break.
My experience in playing for Coach Hutton was instrumental in getting every teaching and coaching job I ever got. The name Hamline and Coach Hutton was very, very prominent in the state of Minnesota and nationally.
I recall that Hamline was nationally known, and all of a sudden, we're not going to be doing national things.
Coach Hutton was a legend while he was still coaching.
Joe was offered the job to be the head coach of the Lakers, and he turned it down.
You go to alumni gatherings and things, and Joe is a popular person.
He had won the national championship in '42. He won it again in 1949, and at that year, he was named the National Association of Basketball Coaches president.
Joe was Hamline, not the president, and maybe he had a difficult time accepting that.
Number one, President Giddens had never run a university. When he got to Hamline, he traveled around the country, which was very good for presidents, but every time he stopped at a place, they said, "How's Joe? How's Joe?" And he didn't know Joe Hutton from Adam, he had just heard about him. So that bothered him. That bothered him to the point where we'll change that around. We want him to know, how's your philosophy department? How's your this department? Don't want to hear about athletics. And he made a statement to that to people. He kind of hurt Dad in the respect of a lot of budgets were cut, travel was cut, things like that.
President Giddens had this idea that money could be spent better and that Hamline could accomplish the same thing with an intramural program. So he wasn't just down on basketball, but Mr. Hutton was the face of it. And that's kind of where he led his attack. And depending on who and when and the details, I think you can draw a good conclusion that Joe's retirement was mandatory and there was going to be no discussion. And that is sadly what happened, because I don't think he was ready.
It was a very personal thing. In our family, always remember the fact that he didn't have to treat Dad that way. Dad could have been an ambassador for Hamline later. He didn't want to quit coaching.
Perhaps it was difficult for a president to accept that the president wasn't the key person at Hamline. Coach Hutton was.
But that was the thing about the Giddens era. We just were so disappointed. And he barely could congratulate Dad when he won something, or people would come and say, I talked to Joe Hutton and how are things going? And he'd flumble off and say, well, we're trying to coordinate the athletics and the academics.
These guys referred to Joe's dismissal as the beginning of the Dark Ages. And in some respects, Hamline's performance as a basketball team mirrored that.
It is truly amazing, like I said, how long it takes to recover from things.
The presidents in the later years after Giddens tried to do things but it's hard to lose it and then all of a sudden try and build it back.
Yeah, I think there's always a perception that there's a significant divide, and some of that is, it goes back to competing priorities, right? Whether it's they want funding for research and we want funding for new locker rooms.
Chemistry professors who do very well don't get headlines in the paper. Basketball teams and coaches who do very well, they get headlines in the paper.
The academic side and the athletic side does not, nor should it be, a disconnect. And Division III, it should be very much connected.
Well, it's very important that the athletic director and the president be on the same page. The president has to be able to support the basketball team, and the basketball team has to be able to support the president. When the system works correctly, they're good athletes and they're good students, and oftentimes that works together.
Athletics is very important to an institution, especially an institution like Hamline as Division III, because a significant number, I think right now maybe a third of our students are athletes. As many of our students who come here want to play sports, but it's not something that they see as separate from their academic program. So it's a part of the well-roundedness of a student.
For us, we're a private institution, so like most private institutions, if not all, we're all tuition driven in some cases, so having the appropriate size of students come in and retaining them and then being able to service them.
Does the athletic programs get more than the academic programs? No, it does not. Sometimes people assume that they get more when in fact they don't. But on the other hand, if we're saying to students who come to us that who you are as a student, the sum total of who you are as a student matters to us, to not put resources in athletics would be saying to them, well, we only care about a part of you, not all of you.
I think people tend to forget, you look at a school like Villanova. Villanova's not much bigger than Hamline. Georgetown or any of these institutions that you look at, they're not much bigger than us. They just have decided, based on finances and infrastructure, we want to be really prominent in this particular sport. We want to invest in that.
I think Hamline University could have been a Division I if it so chose to be a Division I. I think that as president of Hamline University, I like the fact that it's a Division III. It means that we do not give athletic scholarships. It means that we admit the best and the brightest, which means that our athletes are among the best and the brightest. I think that's what it should be. I think that sports should be because students really enjoy the idea of playing sports. So it shouldn't be the academic career. It should be a part of the academic career. And that's what Division III and what we do at Hamline University allows it to be.
That now as the current head coach here, one of the things we're trying to achieve is that kind of sustained success that Coach Hutton and his players had back then.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, to look at different ways to measure success. You can go program by program from what it was 5 years ago to what it is now. You see major progress. Some of it, you have to look beyond wins and losses. For us, we're going to measure our success by what we deem is appropriate based on resources, based on priorities, and based on experience and having student athletes be well-rounded. So it's pretty remarkable what we've done in a 5-year period. I can tell you that certainly that's not going to stop. We're going to continue to make progress. It's taken a long time to recover. I think for those that like Joe Hutton, hopefully it can look back, when I retire, and gentlemen like that can look down on us and say, man, I'm really happy with how they've done.
It was maybe because of Joe, but his love for basketball and Hamline, that this thing developed. You didn't realize it till his legacy was done, and he passed, and at his funeral, national people came and spoke about remembering him in basketball.